The Stasis subclasses introduced in Destiny 2's Beyond Light expansion have completely changed how players can interact with the game, and with each new season, they get better. In this 3-part video series, we're going to look at builds for the Titan, Warlock, and Hunter that make use of the newest Stasis abilities added in the season of the Splicer. Let's get started. When the Behemoth Titan was first introduced, it was by far the weakest of the Stasis subclasses, but over time, it's grown considerably stronger. Its newest aspect, Diamond Lance, is going to be the focus of our build. Shattering or killing enemies with Stasis abilities spawns a lance that can be picked up and thrown or slammed on the ground. On impact, the lance will damage and freeze nearby enemies. One lance can be spawned every 7 seconds, and with that in mind, I want the ability to spawn as many of them as possible. My second aspect will be Howl of the Storm. Activating our melee ability while sliding will spawn stasis crystals and freeze nearby enemies. With the Diamond Lance and Howl of the Storm aspects locked in, we have slots available for 3 fragments. First, I'll be using Whisper of Fissures. Shattering a stasis crystal grants a buff that speeds up our grenade cooldown. This has fantastic synergy with Howl of the Storm because now, whenever I use that, I can break the crystals for damage and grenade CDR. To keep the Fissures buff uptime as high as possible, I'll be using a Glacier Grenade to spawn even more Stasis Crystals. Now, Stasis Crystals are pretty durable, and I think the game's developers realized this, which is why they added a new fragment called Whisper of Rending. Kinetic weapons deal increased damage to Stasis Crystals and frozen enemies. For the final fragment slot, I'll be using Whisper of Shards. Shatter damage and radius is increased. With all the crystals I'm spawning, the damage and radius bonus will be nice, but it's also a nice boost to the enemies shattered by our Diamond Lance. Last but certainly not least, we've got to pick our weapons, armor mods, and stats. For my kinetic weapon, I'll be using the Chroma Rush Assault Rifle. This was added in Season of the Splicer, and it has a phenomenal perk pool to choose from. Wellspring is a phenomenal pairing for this build, but unfortunately I don't have one with it, so I'll be using Thresh instead. Kills will grant us bonus super energy. For armor mods, I want to increase my weapon's damage, so I'll be using High Energy Fire. While charged with light, my weapon damage is increased until I kill an enemy. To gain those charges, I'll be using Taking Charge, Sustained Charge, and Stacks on Stacks. Finally, for armor stats, I want as much strength as I can fit into my armor so I can use Howl of the Storm more often. I'll also be using the One-Eyed Mask Exotic Helmet to increase my survivability. Enemies that damage me are marked, and killing a marked enemy will restore my health and grant an overshield. So, there's clearly a lot going on with this setup, but don't worry, like always, we're going to head into the field and test it out. Alright, just like always, we are going to start breaking down the build in a lost sector. This is an environment in which I can show you the different mechanics without worrying about the enemies instantly killing me. So we're going to start things off in the bunker lost sector, if I can find the entrance. Here we go, found it. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the Diamond Lance, because that is the main draw for this setup. It's a very fun aspect. It's one of the most fun ones that they've added so far, but it is also incredibly powerful, and it's got a little bit of nuance to it as well. So the first thing to note is that when you freeze an enemy and then shatter them, the lance will spawn, and there is a cooldown on when you can spawn another lance. It's about 7 seconds. But something you'll have to keep in mind is the cooldown is on when another lance can be spawned. So you can be holding a lance and then use it to kill an enemy and then spawn another one. Now that's not something that will happen all the time, but it is something to keep in mind if you are moving and grooving and fighting a bunch of enemies and you happen to kill one with a lance and another one spawns, you can take advantage of that. And also, the lance will stay active in your hand for a decent amount of time, but you'll see when it starts flashing, that means it's about to disappear. The next thing I want to talk about is Whisper of Shards and its interaction with Howl of the Storm. So when we throw out our Glacier Grenade to freeze an enemy, and then we'll break those crystals, we get the improved ability regeneration buff, and that will speed up the cooldown of our grenade. But if I ever find myself in a situation where my grenade hasn't fully restored itself from the improved ability regeneration buff, I'll use Howl of the Storm, break 1 or 2 of the crystals to get the buff back again, and then shortly thereafter I will be able to throw yet another Glacier Grenade. So we're going to be spamming those abilities quite a bit, and that's where the Whisper of Rending comes into play. since we are creating so many of those crystals, I want to be able to break them easily, especially from range. Because it is possible to break them from close quarters by spawning a barricade inside the glacier. I will show you that right now. If we put it down like so, we can activate our barricade and we can get a big burst of shatter, but it's not always practical to run up to enemies and do that. So having the ability to very quickly break down these crystals from a decent distance away is going to be helpful for us. So that's going to be the main components of the setup. There are a few other things that are noteworthy. I do have the outreach mod on my class item. It reduces the cooldown of my melee when I use my class ability. So that's going to give me a higher uptime on Howl of the Storm because I don't have any abilities that are reducing that cooldown. And finally, Sustained Charge. It requires 3 rapid kills in order to grant you a stack of Charged with Light. So I'm going to have to get a triple kill in order to get higher energy fire, but I also have Taking Charge, so I'll be able to pick up orbs of light that I create to give myself the higher energy fire buff as well. With all of that out of the way, we're going to kick things up a notch by heading into the Insight Terminus Nightfall Ordeal at the Legend difficulty. This is going to be a little bit challenging. This Nightfall has been known to kick my ass on more than one occasion, but I'm going to try my best to not embarrass myself. There are anti-barrier champions and unstoppable champions in this Nightfall, so I'll be using the Chroma Rush auto rifle as my anti-barrier weapon and the Leviathan's Breath combat bow as my unstoppable weapon. I also have the Salvager Salvo grenade launcher equipped, but I won't be using it too much, but we'll see. We'll see. And here we go. We've touched down. We're going to come into contact with 3 Vex in this first area. They're not particularly challenging. We can take most of them out with the Salvager Salvo. And we did generate an Orb of Light from that, so we're going to pick it up and we're going to get the high energy fire buff on our weapons. We're also triggering the One-Eyed Mask exotic perk by periodically killing the enemy that becomes marked. Hey, let's just freeze this guy so he doesn't slap me in the face, and then we'll kill him. Another Diamond Lance is going to spawn because it wasn't on cooldown, and then we can continue our loop. The shatter damage is pretty nice, but what's also very nice about the shatter is that it will cause enemies to flinch a little bit, which will give you a small bit of breathing room. So now we've got a barrier champion, a barrier hobgoblin, and we froze him with that Diamond Lance so that we could take him out without worrying about him firing on us. The crowd control that we have with this setup is absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to try and get to this next area and use the lance before it disappears. It's starting to flash. Am I going to make it? No. So the duration of the Diamond Lance isn't always long enough for you to traverse the entire map with it in hand, but most of the time you're going to be actively engaged in combat, so you won't really need to worry about that. So we triggered the One-Eyed Mask once again, and that overshield is coming into play, helping us survive against large groups of enemies. Let's go ahead and put that freeze on. The shatter knocked that guy back a little bit, and it allowed me to take him out without too much difficulty. So this is where the Salvager Salvo is going to come into play a little bit. We've got a bunch of enemies at a distance, and they're going to be difficult to take out. So we're just going to stay behind cover and pew them down. The One-Eyed Mask overshield allowing us to soak up some damage from the Scions that are trying to snipe. Alright, now we are moving into the most difficult section of the Nightfall before the boss. There is a very high volume of enemies as well as champions in this bit, so I'm going to try and play from range and play pretty safely. You see the champions firing those missiles at me, and those can be very annoying if they hit me at the wrong time. We've still got a little glacier up there. We got an enemy marked with the One-Eyed Mask, so we'll take that overshield. And let's try to change positions a little bit. Let's go ahead and send that out, send that out. And let's rotate around a little more. Hey, these guys are going to push up on me pretty aggressively. Let's put a stop to that. Alright, and then we've got the barrier champion trying to rotate on me as well, but my barricade is helping me out. I had a diamond lance sitting around on the field. Nearly got insta-killed by his super powerful Gatling gun. That would have been incredibly frustrating. There we go. So let's just... Oh, no. I fucked up. Alright, next we're going to have to survive a wave of enemies. And hopefully I can hold on to this lance until at least one bit of the wave comes out. So I can get a quick freeze, but I don't think it's going to happen. No. That's okay. We're going to create another one, so it's no big deal. Alright, let's see. Let's try and keep the major enemies under control with our freezes. We got another diamond lance in hand. We can throw that out, as well as the glacier grenade. And now the shatters are going to start coming out. Let's put up our barricade because we did take some pretty hefty damage there. One-eyed mask coming into play again. I should probably use my salvager salvo right now because there's a lot of enemies clumped together. And that'll be a great opportunity to get the chain reaction perk to proc and deal with a large grouping of them. The Diamond Lance once again coming into play. The ability to crowd control enemies pretty much whenever you want to with a very, very high amount of precision feels fantastic. One of the biggest shortcomings of a lot of the Titan subclasses is that they don't have the ability to deal with threats incredibly well at longer ranges, and the Diamond Lance is giving me that ability. That was incredibly rude. Anyway, like I was saying, one of the biggest shortcomings for the Titans, a lot of the Titan subclasses, is that they don't have the ability to deal with threats at range, and the Diamond Lance definitely makes up for that. It is a quick freeze with very low damage, but you can use it from incredible distances. And the real icing on the cake is that you get the shatter afterwards. So even though the lance itself doesn't hit incredibly hard, you are going to shatter a bunch of targets, and that is going to do some nice damage. And there we go. That's going to do it for the Diamond Lance build for the Behemoth Titan in the Season of the Splicer. Initially, I wasn't too impressed with the lance, but after experimenting with it a bit more and finding something that had the right mixture of cooldown reduction for my abilities so that I can freeze targets frequently enough to then spawn the lances to throw and freeze more enemies, it started to feel really good. And this is a build that I'm going to bring into a lot of different pieces of content in the game when it is practical for me to do so. Something noteworthy, when you enter higher difficulty content like Legend and Master Nightfalls, the lance is not going to one-shot even the weakest enemies like a Red Bar Scion, but it will still offer you fantastic crowd control from range with fantastic precision. With all of that said, we've still got to talk about a build for the Warlock and the Hunter, so stay tuned for that. But as always, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support the channel more than you already do by watching, liking, subscribing, and commenting, you can head over to patreon.com/iBluairJgR to become a patron. As always, the name of the game is Destiny 2, the name of the channel is iBluairJgR. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.